My guest today is Jeremy Yamaguchi, a serial entrepreneur who's built, scaled, and exited 3 home services businesses, each time combining technology with so-called boring, fragmented markets. He built Golden Shine in the housekeeping space, then Lawn Law, Y Combinator-backed national law care brand he sold after 8 years of sprinting. Now he's building Cabana, a national pool cleaning company that blends M&A, software, and local execution. Thanks a lot for coming to the Hoiko Builders podcast, Jeremy.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Mick.
Could we start with a bang? I mean, this hopefully helps me understand how you think about your current opportunity and the next business you're building, Cabana. Some time ago, Nikita Pierre have tweeted the greatest trick that venture funds played on entrepreneurs is to make it seem glamorous to spend your most youthful years having meetings with middle managers while you patiently wait for a liquidity event that will arrive when you're old, overweight, and ugly. And you wrote a fascinating retweet, where you pretty much share different ideas of which type of opportunities you built, and you not like giving advice to people immediately, but again, as I said, trying to understand how you think about different opportunities. So maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, so, this is some time ago, but about probably 5-6 years ago, I was in 2 CEO forums at the same time. And both of these forums had, different makeups of the founder, different kind of founder compositions. One was heavily venture-backed with a bunch of hard-charging, venture types who had raised hundreds of millions of dollars and were building or attempting to build multi-billion-dollar empires. The other one was a bunch of bootstrappers. And the thing that was notable to me, and kind of what I riffed on in my response to Nikita, is that the bootstrap contingent were visibly far more wealthy, right? Like they lived in gorgeous houses on the beach and had tons of disposable income, and had already like pulled forward the lifestyle that you would expect from hyper successful founders. Whereas the venture guys were in many cases more sophisticated. Not because, raising venture makes you more sophisticated, but they were just playing at a scale that required a depth of sophistication that the bootstrappers, didn't necessarily need. Nevertheless, lived in relatively like modest homes and had like deferred a lot of those lifestyle gains. Now, it should be said, many of that group have since sold their companies for, high 8-figure, low 9-figure, mid 9-figure sums. So, they won in the end, but that was a very long. But also, some of them also went to zero. Some of them spent 10 years compounding to very large paper valuations and then saw no kind of exit liquidity and no final financial reward. It was just an interesting kind of thing to observe, is that bootstrapping might not take you to the same heights. It certainly won't, but it certainly will give you, or often will give you, a much nearer term lifestyle boost than if you go the venture path. Venture path is very much delayed gratification, I think, for most folks. I will add one final caveat, though, which is that the advent of secondaries and founders raising kind of secondary liquidity in these hot rounds has solved this to some degree, but that phenomena tends to trend on interest rates and kind of broad deal heat and stuff that may or may not be out of your control, so you can't quite count on it. But that is a remedy to provide nearer term liquidity to venture guys who are otherwise locked up for a decade or more.
Excellent. This is what I wanted to discuss. Now, what about you, Jeremy? Let's start with your background, and maybe most importantly, how do you do it all? I mean, your skill sets, your beliefs, your execution, the drive. Where does it all come from? And try to mix it with a story.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can go back to the beginning, but I was born and raised overseas, kind of born to missionary parents. So grew up in Japan, Southeast Asia, and East Africa as a teen, and immigrated to the US as a late, at 16, kind of late teenager, and always was very entrepreneurial. Grew up kind of selling candy and stuffed animals to my schoolyard friends as a, 10-year-old, and then made balloon animals and sold them at festivals and kind of matsuri in Japan. Created fine wood furniture as a late teen and sold that to kind of get to the United States, get to Africa and then eventually the US. And so like had a pretty instinctive entrepreneurial streak or DNA from the beginning, and knew I just wanted to build companies. So when I got here at 16, I got a GED early, finished high school at 16 and started my first business, which was a web dev shop. I'd previously been a self-taught designer and was doing a lot of visual design work, but got sick of designing things that just lived in a hard drive and never saw the light of day or did anything, or had no function. It was just only form. And so went out and taught myself how to code and built a digital agency over the next 4 or 5 years. Started building websites for friends, scaled that into a growth marketing firm, kind of got deep on SEO, SEM, lead gen. It's where I first cut my teeth in kind of performance marketing and digital marketing, and then ran that for a bunch of my late teens, early 20s, and was very much more successful than I thought I would be as a 19-year-old, but was ultimately limited by the finite number of hours I had in a day, was looking for something that had more natural scale than a consulting business, which was bounded by my kind of finite time. And found the opportunity in 2008. I went to go book a maid, realized the entire home service landscape is super offline, largely low tech. And you really just had like two choices at the time. You could go to Craigslist or Yelp or the Yellow Pages at the time. That was still a thing. And like pick a random service provider. Quality was all over the map. Or you could go to, Molly Maids or Mary Maids or one of these large franchises. And even the big franchise players who were much more expensive still didn't use much in the way of software to run their businesses. So I looked at this and I was like, man, I know how to build software. I know how to grow companies. I know how to like do lead gen, kind of generate leads. What if I just built a software platform that generated all the demand and then paired third-party independent contractor kind of home service professionals with homeowners? And we start with house cleaning and then we do carpets and windows and kind of scale from there. And so I ended up building what was, essentially like a handy, which, exists in the US. They've raised about 130 million. They eventually sold to IAC, but, prior to them and fully bootstrapped. So I built this in 2009, ran it to 2013, and then sold it to a private equity firm in my early 20s. And that was kind of the first meaningful exit and, the end of that particular journey. But it was a great business, never raised outside capital, grew it across Southern California and then exited. And then knew I wanted to build another home service company. I was like, man, the entire home services landscape, even though I'd been in the space at that point 4 years, it hadn't still evolved that much, right? Like it was hyper fragmented. Honestly, man, like 15 years later, this is still kind of true. Like we've seen somewhat more tech penetration, but not as much as you would imagine. And it just is like, it's very much, for whatever reason, blue collar industries live on the lagging tail of tech adoption curves. And they're often last to adopt kind of novel, nascent technology as it emerges. And so, I realized, man, broadly home services is like $1 trillion a year in the US. It all looks like this. So like, let's go keep building in this category. And I went and I started a company called Lawn Love, which was a marketplace for lawn care and landscaping. Not too dissimilar from Golden Shine, kind of home services marketplace. Only this time around, I knew I wanted to raise venture. Because one of the things that I faced at Golden Shine is at the tail end of running that business, having raised no outside capital, I saw over the horizon a bunch of hyper-funded competitors start to emerge. So a company called HomeJoy raised about 40 million from Google Ventures and Y Combinator and Andreessen Horowitz and so forth. Company called Handy, again, raised a bunch of money from various East Coast VCs, launched out of HBS. And then a company called Exec was founded by Justin Kahn, kind of founder of Twitch, somewhat celebrity entrepreneur, great dude, but very well capitalized. And all of these folks are selling house cleaning services for, negative unit economics, paying their maids more than they were charging the customer. They were flagrantly violating labor law and worker classification laws. And I looked at this and I'm like, man, these guys have raised infinite war chests and they're coming for me and they're going to run negative unit economics until the end of time. This is not a great business to be in. So got out of the way of that particular steam train and, but resolved that the next time around, I wanted to be the one with the war chest, right? Like I wanted to be the one with venture dollars to go eat markets, potentially run in negative gross margin territory for some hopefully short period of time in order to kind of take market share. And so applied to Y Combinator with the next one, got an interview, ultimately got a comeback with traction, pitched Paul Graham, Jessica Livingston, Paul Buchheit, a bunch of folks. It's like 7 of them arrayed and me as a solo founder kind of fighting for my life on the interview, but ended up got the interview, but ultimately got a no. And it was a fateful email that was, somewhat disheartening to get. But I kind of resolved to keep building. I knew I could build another like high growth, high velocity business in this space. And so just put my head down, grinded it out for the next 6 months. And then as an afterthought, applied again on the final day of applications on the summer 14 batch. And more or less just reused my same app and, submitted it. Paul Buchheit immediately emailed me and was like, hey, what's changed since your last kind of application and today? And at that point, we were growing very quickly from like comically small numbers. So we did $200 in revenue in month 1 and, $700 in month 2 and $1,500 in month 3 and $3,500 in 4 and $7,800 in 5. And we were at like $13,000 a month in revenue 6 months in. And I just shared those numbers. He invited me to interview again. Next time around, I interviewed with Sam Altman, Kazar Yunus, and a bunch of other folks over there. And it was a very different tenor. The whole dynamic was like pretty collegial. They were answering each other's questions for me. Ultimately got a yes, got in, went through the program, which was a whole gauntlet in itself that I could talk about. But, emerged out of YC, raised $2 million from Joe Montana and the Pritzker family and a bunch of folks. And we were off to the races. I then spent the next 8 years growing Lawn Love, or 7.5 years growing Lawn Love to a national brand in lawns. So we scaled across 120 cities, 40 states, had about 250 kind of full-time corporate folks at Lawn Love and about 7,000 techs in the field mowing lawns every day. So we built a, meaningful business in kind of on-demand home services, ultimately sold the company to a competitor called Lawn Starter and merged to create the largest marketplace in lawn and garden in the country. That business is still going very well, but found a happy exit in a category that I think has a lot of Deadpool, right? Like on-demand Uber for X style businesses have almost become, they've very much become a meme as, Me Too model kind of, they take a working model in one vertical and try to like obtusely apply it to every other vertical imaginable, and it often does not work. So I'm pretty proud that we managed to build a profitable business on relatively few dollars. We raised a grand total of like $6.5 million and built a phenomenal scaled business with, in a category that has a whole lot of dead wood. So that was the journey. And then, could talk about post facto stuff, but I realize I'm giving you an entire end-to-end life monologue, and happy to pause and let you ask questions where you have them.
That's perfect, man. Thanks for sharing. You said it's this space that the industry overall, services industry, is not too developed. Why you think it's like this? Don't we have enough Jeremys, or what is the thing there like?
I think it's probably barrier to entry is very low, right? And so because it's very easy, this isn't true in every vertical. One of the mistakes that new home service founders often make is they think home service verticals are largely the same because, from a zoomed out view, they all have, similar mechanics, right? Like customer comes to you, you quote a job, you close the job, you schedule and dispatch a job, service pro goes out, renders service, you bill the customer, done deal, right? That is like at a zoomed out level how it all works. But every industry is extremely nuanced, has all of its kind of unique idiosyncratic hair, and you got to really be thoughtful about where you build and why. Not all of the verticals are equally good. But I think in many cases, home services is just an easy business to get into as a single solo operator. So this means that your average population of home service operators are probably moderately sophisticated versus if it had a much higher barrier to entry.
A very quick pause from the podcast. If you like what Jeremy is building at Cabana, but you don't have a pipeline of proprietary deals yourself, check out our today's sponsor, CapitalPad. It's where investors back the next generation of business buyers. Inside, you'll find vetted searchers, real acquisition opportunities, and deals you won't see on public brokers. Think like serious operators, clean data rooms, clear timelines, and buyers who actually know how to run the businesses after the close. Because the real edge isn't just finding a deal, it's backing someone with a time horizon advantage, the operational discipline, and the judgment to buy from the right sellers and build for the long term. If you believe in backing builders, head to capitalpad.com. You can browse the opportunities, partner with proven operators, and put your capital to work alongside people who execute. That's capitalpad.com. I'll also put the link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
right? You would only be able to attract founders who could raise substantial amounts of capital and, had to jump over a lot of filtering hurdles in order to even get access to play the game. You can play the home services game at a kind of entry level trivially easily. I mean, the most obvious example of it is like teenagers mowing people's lawns, right? Like you could literally as a 12-year-old go mow someone's lawn and collect $30 and like start a small lawn mowing business. So if that's any indicator of like, if teenagers can do it, then what's the average level of operator in the industry? A saturation or kind of a median operator that might not be as like sophisticated because they just simply don't have to be. In many cases, they can become that, right? Like I've met many, many, many home service operators who started as teenagers and kind of kept doing it one day after the other and have over 30 years developed impressive levels of sophistication in their businesses, almost like irreducible levels of sophistication as you want to go buy their companies and you realize how much tribal knowledge and domain expertise they've accrued over so many years. But that's a story for another day. But I think that's my like off the cuff sense of why it's still relatively fragmented. It also just like, frankly, is not an industry where it's easy to sell vertical software, right? Like if you think about it, vertical software go-to-markets are probably best targeted at mid-sized categories where there's enough mid-sized companies to go buy or go sell your software into. When you've got this like massive field of minnows, the go-to-market motion for selling vertical SaaS to pool cleaning companies, where the average company, there's 72,000 pool cleaning companies in the US, the average company does like 130 grand a year in revenue. It's a difficult business model to go, chase down a bunch of tiny businesses with what we call single pullers or chuck in a truck types and sell them $50 a month software. They churn at 20% a year on average because they go out of business to go get real jobs, right? It's just a tough model. So that I think is another reason why penetration has kind of lagged. But we'll see, honestly, man. Like AI might change all this stuff. There's the ease and the speed at which people can build and deploy functional point solutions in near real time is like honestly incredible. And it's a brave new world out there. We'll see how it looks in about 10 years.
What's your view on game selection? Because something you mentioned, like the average level of the operator, maybe not the highest, because the kids can start their business very simply, just doing door knocking or just calling their neighbors on the same street. It's relatively easy. So what is your thought process when choosing those opportunities when it comes to the game selection, like who you are going to against, like and this question paired with what are your strengths and weaknesses when doing it all?
I think this is probably one of the most important questions and possibly one of the least interrogated ones by founders who start companies. I know it's certainly true in my case. Most of the early businesses that I started were really just like me putting one foot in front of the other, and I kind of fell into them in one way or another, right? Like I didn't set out to be a home services guy, but now have 15 years, building, scaling, and selling home services companies, now buying home services companies. And so, I think it's only on this most recent endeavor with Cabana and the pool industry that I've been extremely explicit in what I wanted and what I was trying to achieve. Almost everything else, even Lawn Love, I took like a week off after selling Golden Shine and started Lawn Love a week later. I definitely should have taken more time, but like it was pretty reflexive. Like I was just like in the business and kind of intuitively knew how to do something else that was narrowly adjacent to what I just finished doing. So I went and did it, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like to answer your question of how do you know what businesses to operate in or what opportunities to pursue? Like I'm a big believer in comparative advantage, right? Like ask yourself what things come to you easily that other people find difficult, right? Like if you're like some power nerd who's just incredibly good at churning out prodigious amounts of product, but you struggle to sell or you struggle to talk to people, you should probably not, find yourself in a very sales heavy industry, right? Unless you have a counterpart who can go take that mantle and do that job. Similarly, if you're like not technical, this is probably the more common failure mode, actually. I think technical people can learn to sell much more easily than like non-technical people can learn how to code. Although soon to be not true, or already not true given the advent of AI. But, if you're not technical, I see a lot of non-technical founders trying to go solve hard problems that have big technical moats or barriers. That's really tough. right? Like you don't know what you don't know. The unknown unknown surface area is enormous, and the minefield that you're likely to walk across is much larger and more densely populated than you probably anticipated. So like you got to be careful there. I would very much just say play to your strengths. First, know your strengths. Maybe this is the hardest problem, like know thyself. I think a lot of people live blindly and somewhat autonomously without actually interrogating what they are good at and what brings them joy. And so write it down, be explicit. What are you actually good at? If you're not good at anything, figure out what you can get reasonably good at. I really do love this like, who's the guy? So Jim Simons, founder of Rentech, has this story that I've thought of many, many times. And he talks about how, growing up in high school, he was extremely, precocious. He graduated high school early, got into MIT early, very, very, very smart, graduated top of his class, and then gets to MIT and is doing math at MIT. And he realizes that he is measurably less smart than some of the peers around him. Even though he is like a one in tens of thousands intelligence, there are people at MIT who are so kind of comically smart at math that he is embarrassingly slow relative to them, right? And so he developed this idea that I've thought about many, many times, and it is, okay, like, it's good that I'm smart, but it's not good enough that I'm smart, because there are people here who are demonstrably smarter than me. So I need to be smart, and I need to be something other than just smart, and I need to meld those two things to build my own unique, durable advantage. And in his case, what he arrived at is he was smart and had good taste in what sorts of problems to work on. And he observed that even though there were people at MIT with substantially higher clock speeds than him, they kind of just, again, reflexively fell into problems that were most adjacent to them and didn't really think through what was worthy of their time, or what problems were most promising, or where the implications for commercialization were most significant. Should they solve these problems? They didn't really think through that. So Jim Simons had good taste and was smart. He was both of those things. And he wielded the combination like a weapon to create Rentech, which is, obviously one of the greatest kind of trading firms in human history. I think that's a phenomenal framework, right? Like, I think this notion of you're probably not going to be the best in the world at any one thing that you do, but I would venture that if you keep refining what you do to find the intersection of various things that you're at least reasonably good at, you will find something wherein you are probably a one of, the top 10 best people who are jointly, smart and personable and can do reasonable marketing work and are reasonably good at code and can work with, blue collar folks who are difficult in the field. And, you can kind of find the intersection of your many relatively strong talents to the point where you now have differentiated yourself as a one of one. And that's, and if you can find an industry or an opportunity that aligns with that, you're in an incredible place and you're on the right path.
That's a great thing you said, having good taste on solving the right problem, because you can be wrong here as well by having a good taste but choosing a wrong problem for yourself. So that means you're not going to be good at it.
Exactly. It's find the intersection of things that you're good at, your zone of excellence, and then try to find opportunities that are most, where the Venn diagram maximally overlaps. The problem space overlaps what you happen to be good at, and what comes easily at you that other people find difficult. That's comparative advantage, right? If you find yourself operating in that world, you're going to outcompete your competitors all day long because they're suffering every day and you're singing and skipping into work. Makes a difference.
What about you? You're smart, and what's the thing for you?
Oh, I mean, I'm a living example of this advice. I've taken it to heart. I'm not the best home services operator, in that there are very much people who are better at running scaled blue collar companies. But compared to, and I'm not the best programmer or software engineer or kind of product manager in the world, but I'm a pretty damn good product manager and I'm a reasonably good programmer. And for a technologist, I am unbelievably good at blue collar home service stuff because I've been doing it for 15 years. And I have a lot of the scar tissue and the trials of having worked with, armies and armies and armies of blue collar types. And I can very easily trade in that industry, and I know that industry well. I'm not the best growth marketer in the world, but I'm much better at growth marketing than 99.9% of software engineers, and certainly most pool companies, right? And I'm not the best like fundraiser in the world, but I'm radically better at fundraising than like anyone who wears those hats generally, right? Or certainly anyone who wears the intersection of those hats. So all of that together, it turns out, are the explicit skills that I need to be uniquely good at to go do these deals, right? To build Cabana. And Cabana is a direct, explicit expression of all of the things that I happen to be quite good at, and targeted toward building a multi-billion-dollar kind of public scale company.
Now, when you take day to day, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months. We discussed this a bit, but what comes easy to you when you look at your day, look at your weeks, months? What comes easy to you?
So the things that come easiest to me are actually, weirdly, I love doing hands-on kind of IC style work. Like I love being in the weeds, literally helping build product, building out marketing campaigns, driving SEO. Working with people has become a lot easier for me as well. Like I like building great teams. Obviously, part of the team building exercise is one of managing, underperformers out of the business, and that's never fun. But if you've done a good job hiring, and I think we very much have, you're going to largely be surrounded by excellent people who motivate you, inspire you, and add energy to you. And working with them and kind of managing that org ends up being pretty fun because it's really just doing cool things with people you genuinely like and enjoy. And that comes easily to me. I don't find that to be like net energy depleting. It's energy adding. Honestly, talking to pool company owners and hearing their life stories and connecting with them is pretty easy for me, mostly because for whatever reason, I was born pretty infernally curious. And it's a really special thing to be able to parachute into someone's 40-year business and see all the decisions that they made and understand how they made those decisions and why they made those decisions and learn about them as individuals and connect with them personally. Like that is fun and like genuinely interesting. Like it scratches a deep curiosity in me that I think I find wildly rewarding. And so that stuff comes easy. I could do that all day. Yeah, there's more, but that's like some of the broad strokes of it.
Now you covered a bit pool company owners. Tell me what exactly are you building with Cabana, and tell me the thesis and where are you today, and let's go from there.
Yeah, so at Cabana, we're building the first national brand in pool services. And the whole idea here is that if you look at most other home service vertical, whether it's pest control or lawn care or HVAC, usually it's like wildly oversaturated with private equity roll-ups. There's many, usually one or more public scale household names in these industries, whether it's True Green on the lawn care side or, Orkin, Terminix on the pest control side, doesn't exist in pools. But pools are about $10 billion a year. They're largely recurring. They're non-cyclical. It grows through every macro environment, and it's hyper-fragmented. But no one has built a household name, national scale player in this space for a variety of reasons, mostly because there's not a lot of scaled companies for private equity to go by, so it's not a good target for traditional roll-up models. And because they're pretty hard businesses to run, barrier to entry is low. Any dude with a pool skimmer and some chemicals can, throw stuff in his truck and start cleaning pools. There's a lack of middle management sophistication across the org or across the industry where you have, a deep bench of talented service managers that you can go tap to help scale and operate your businesses. And these are all like barriers to scale that we're solving using process, systems, software, and just being smarter than our competitors.
Hi, one more quick pause from the podcast to tell about our second sponsor, Spacebar Studios. They've been a long time sponsor for us, and in January this month they're offering an insane offer. 35,000 new newsletter subscribers in 90 days, guaranteed, or you don't pay. There is no setup fees, no retainers, but this offer is only for 2 companies in January. So if you want more clients, more deals, more capital, and just maybe better operators showing up in your inbox, what you need to do is you need to be known. And Spacebar Studios, they will handle everything for you. Strategy, voice, writing, design, send schedule, and again, they will grow your list. So you can focus on investing, operating, and running your business. So if you want more customers, again, book a free call with them, spacebarstudios.co. I'll also put the link in the show notes. That's spacebarstudios.co. And now back to the show.
And so that's the thesis, is like, can we spend the next 10 or 15 years building a household name in pools? And we do this in 3 ways. Step 1, we go buy amazing pool cleaning companies, partner with sellers who have run their firms for years, have lovingly built beautiful businesses, and are looking for the next chapter. We'll partner with them and buy their companies. Step 2, we kind of professionalize operations further. In some cases, learn a lot from them on what they've done better, and democratize that across the rest of our business at Cabana. But fine tune the playbook so that we can continue to drive performance and margin over time, and grow the companies organically, which we do very well because I have a 20-year growth marketing background. I built lawnlove.com into a top 3 property in lawns on Google. We did 1 million uniques a month and generated hundreds of thousands of leads a year. So building that same thing in pools and then piping all of that organic demand into the companies that we buy is a big part of the thesis. But finally, and this is probably the most important part, is that we use these businesses as the bootloader to build vertical software. And this is really important for a few reasons, right? 1, you can take off the shelf software and tooling like Skimmer or PoolBrain or Ion or whatever, and you could deploy it into a mid to small size pool cleaning company, and you're going to get a decent amount of tech leverage from that, right? It's far better, far superior than running your routes on paper, right? But the software that exists in the market today is not built for any sort of scaled company. It's not built for complex multi-location operations. It's not built with the premise of integrating lots of standalone enterprises at a high velocity through an M&A style growth model. And what we've learned, I wrote the first 300,000 lines of code at LawnLove, and then we hired armies of engineers and product guys who wrote many millions and more behind me and built an enormous amount of product to power that business. And what we learned at LawnLove is that the amount of technology leverage you can get when you build opinionated tools that solve your own bespoke idiosyncratic needs are enormous. And it's an enormous advantage to have in-house technical expertise to fully automate workflows end to end in the way that you want to run your business, than to have to build generic general software that works for any random pool cleaning company, from one single individual in a truck to 50 trucks on the road. You can't build good generalizable software that drives. You could build generalizable software, you could build good generalizable software, but definitionally, it's not going to be able to give you the same amount of technology leverage as if you built bespoke software for your own unique needs. And so that is what we do. And that is a big advantage. And that is something that, one, your average pool cleaning company is not building their own tech, right? They don't have the in-house expertise. They're not, native technologists. We are. And honestly, the PE firms aren't doing it. And they're not doing it because they are mostly financial arbitrageurs, not technologists as well. They're not kind of by definition innovative. They're not trying to radically change the way things are done in a given industry. They're trying to take best in class off the shelf and deploy it into some business. And that's best case scenario. Let's assume you're not getting slapped into some platform and left for dead, just to be flipped in 3 to 5 years to the next holder, right? So this gives us a big advantage versus the PE buyers, because their time horizons are much shorter than ours, right? They are definitionally playing 3 to 6 year games before they have to recap and sell you to the next bidder. We're playing long-term games with long-term people. We're going to be doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, however long it takes to build a household name in pools. That's what we're doing. And this means that we have the natural incentives to go invest in teams. And if we buy companies, the goal isn't to just fire half of them to get the EBITDA up so we can flip you in the next 3 to 4 years. The goal is to genuinely invest in your team, because there's not some other bag holder downstream that we can just dump you on. We are the bag holder. We care about how well the business performs over decades. And so we can take EBITDA down as long as we need to invest in R&D and build real tech and, give us a durable, long-term competitive operating advantage. And that's exactly what we do. And I think it's an enormous advantage to sellers, because they can sell their companies to private equity where they know the incentives, just not that these are bad people. There's many great people in the industry, but the incentives by virtue of their funding models require them to juice EBITDA in the short term and optimize for the short term. Our incentives are to optimize for the long term. And we have a profound time horizon advantage that we will exploit until the end of time.
Can you share Cabana today? Where you're at? How has it been? Has it been as you expected, or how's the investors' approach? How things are going?
Yeah, so we've raised $10 million so far. We've done 10 deals over the last 18 months. Without sharing explicit numbers, we've grown revenue 4x year over year from 2024 to 2025. We expect to double again in Q1. We're growing extremely fast. Most roll-ups that we've looked at suffer pretty badly from retention and churn. We have not. We've retained, most of the customers that we've acquired. We've retained 100% of the teammates that we've acquired. We have, as of today, I'm very proud to say, have never lost an employee from a company that we've bought that was regretted, right? Like, there's certainly people that you buy who are like not a good fit for the new regime. And we happily move them on to find better jobs that are better suited for their kind of long-term interests. But of the folks that we buy, the companies that we buy and the folks that come with it, we've never lost a person that we wanted to keep. And this is very hard to do because you're buying companies that are mostly just a collection of people and some trucks, right? These are people-powered businesses. We're not buying factories. There's not like huge existing infrastructure. This isn't software where most of the value is in the code. The value is in the team. And so if you don't do a good job integrating these teams and helping these folks who, to be clear, had no say in being sold, right? Their company got sold out from under them. They might have reported to their founder boss for 30, 40 years. And they might feel some kind of way about you coming in and being like, hi, I'm your new boss now. So handling that transition with grace and being very thoughtful about how to communicate well to the team and get them inspired and motivated for the new frontier is a lot of what we do. And so far it's been going very well. So this is, to answer your question, we are outperforming our initial expectations handily and are very excited for where we're going. But when you set out to eat an elephant, there's no other way to do it but one bite at a time. And there's a whole lot of wood to chop between here and the promised land. So we're definitely not, taking it easy. I think we're kind of fiendishly ambitious and excited to go 10x again in the next few years to continue on route to, what we think is an inevitable public scale company that we're building.
You said you've accomplished 10 deals and no good person has left. So I would like to ask, what changes for those people, for those small business owners when they join to you? And I guess I can say they are not working for you, they're working with you. So what changes for them?
So the first thing that changes for them is that the career ladder just immediately extends in front of them, right? So most times, most pool cleaning companies that we look at are, kind of small to mid-sized. And that means kind of by definition that anyone in these companies has in many cases been limited, in their career growth by just the scale of their own business, right? It's difficult to graduate into a senior role if someone's already sitting in that seat and the company's not growing very fast to create a bunch of seats like it, right? So if you want to become a service manager, if you're a field tech and you want to become a lead tech, you kind of got to wait for the lead tech in front of you to leave or retire in order for you to get that job. If you're a lead tech and you want to become a service manager, you kind of got to do the same, right? So they're very static. They're very slow paced in terms of the career growth that they can offer their teams. And it's through no fault of the business owners. These are beautiful businesses and they're often very loyal, wonderful people that they've kind of built, teams that they've built around themselves. But you just can't create jobs for no reason. You can't create roles that don't need to exist. We create roles all the time because we grow so fast, right? We have an infinite appetite for service managers and lead techs and repair techs and kind of senior and progressively more senior folks across the company as we grow. And we're big believers in promoting from within. So the second we buy the company, we can genuinely tell these people like, look, you just got a 10x extension of the career ladder in front of you. If you want to keep doing what you're doing and you love cleaning pools all day and you've been doing it for 20 years and you don't really want to change that, great. Here's what's not going to change. Your route's not going to change. Your pay is not going to change. Your benefits aren't going to change. None of that's going to change. The only thing that is going to change is you're going to wear a different shirt and you're going to probably drive a different colored wrapped truck and you're going to use a different software, but it's going to be pretty similar to what you already know in terms of the kind of base mechanics of it. It's easy to learn. That's all that changes. Everything else, you're getting net new benefits, most likely. You're never losing benefits. And your career opportunities just expanded meaningfully if you're motivated and if you're ambitious. and if you're interested, the path just got a lot wider for you. So we tell that story all the time, and teams find it very motivating for sure.
How many synergies are?
No, like unsurprisingly, like as you would expect, they find that pretty exciting.
How many synergies for those businesses once they're on your portfolio, in your portfolio?
I mean, the synergies are many, but most of it comes from our own proprietary software. But like the thing that I mean, there's obvious synergies, right? Like you get sort of like scale economies on your chems, you get scale economies on your route density, and it's kind of localized network effects on routing and labor margins and so forth. But you get like operating leverage on the kind of back office and holdco team and stuff. But really, what was surprising about this strategy that I don't think people often expect is how much you learn from the businesses that you buy. And I know that sounds weird because you're like, why would you not expect to learn a lot from them? You've just joined the industry and they've been operating for 40 years. But what I mean more by that is most business owners who are running their companies, this is true for like all businesses, not just pool cleaning, they run one company for their entire time in the industry, right? And they might like have some peer groups and to chat with some peers, but it's usually pretty competitive and pretty closed-lipped, right? And they don't get to see the alternative universe where they'd made different decisions all along the way. When you buy companies, you literally get to parachute into the alternative universe and say, Bob built Bob's pool service with, a per stop payment model, and this has this margin implication. Jeff put chemical tanks in his supply house, and this had this implication, right? Like these guys charged customers for fifth week services. These guys did not. These guys charge customers for yearly heater tune-ups. That's a great idea. We should probably do this, right? Like, you get to basically see all of the best practices and like smart decisions that these operators made again and again and again. And at some point, when you buy like 100 of these things, you're going to have basically covered the entire surface area of good ideas that could have possibly been had. And you're going to have incorporated all of those best ideas into your business to create the like mega best operated company, ignoring economies of scale, ignoring other synergies, like just the ability to adopt good ideas that are frozen and isolated in this one, small to mid-sized company in Sacramento and deploy it across your entire scaled operation. That is really cool. And you only get this with a high velocity M&A machine. And most founders never get to see this because you just don't get to see intimately all of the kind of decisions that happen in a similar competitive business. So it's pretty cool. I like that a lot. That part itself was very surprising.
Now I want to get a bit more practical for listeners. Yes, your portfolio is growing through M&A, but what about each separate company once joining with your team, with your holding company? And because you mentioned something before that you're strong at growing those companies organically. So maybe you can share, I don't know, top 3 things. Please don't hold back, because listeners, they run those traditional businesses themselves, and maybe there are some things which you buy a business, you already see it before that it's screaming. Like that once you change this, so many things will improve. Like if you can bring out like maybe 2 or 3 things based on your experience.
Do you mean in terms of like operating performance and margin, or new growth and customer acquisition, or
yes,
customer?
The latter.
Well, as you might imagine, most of these companies are not particularly deep on SEO, SEM, right? If they're running paid ads, they're probably not running really sophisticated advertising campaigns. So being able to spin up our own kind of advertising models and deploy them into these new businesses is quite effective. A lot of these businesses have relatively modest review profiles. They aren't really leveraging kind of GMB. We go heavily in that area and certainly invest aggressively across local search and kind of Google My Business. A lot of these companies, the most common one, and this is kind of a trope at this point, but it's still true, is that they're run by small to mid-sized business, the small to mid-sized businesses run by owners who are busy. And they're busy running their teams, they're busy in the field. And so they often don't answer the phone as fast as you might hope. And so just having really good lead response and nurturing like flows, so that when you do generate the customer interest, you're answering the phone and you're quoting the customer immediately and you're getting them, what they need fast, that just has a profound effect on conversion rate. That has a profound effect on how the customer views you from the first interaction. Like, investing there is big, and we can do that basically on day one, right? We have a full call center and, very robust lead nurturing and kind of follow-up processes. So we can bolt on these new businesses into our marketing machine and respond much more quickly to leads, nurture them better, drive kind of more top of funnel through investing across local search, paid search, and so forth. And those are the biggest drivers. Transparently, that makes quite a big difference.
Another practical thing I think we should discuss is fundraising, because you've been able to successfully raise capital on the one hand. On the other hand, you have this experience of actually growing the companies and eventually selling it. So you've experienced both sides of it, and then you started again. And so what are maybe some of the things which you've experienced, what works, and maybe folks who haven't done fundraising yet, or they've done but maybe haven't been that successful? So what comes to mind when I say fundraising one-on-one?
Oh man, how much time do you have? Okay. I could definitely talk for like hours about fundraising strategy and how I think about it. And obviously, like, the later hours would get progressively more nuanced and unhinged. But the broad strokes of it, let me try to encapsulate the sum totality of my fundraising knowledge into like 5 minutes. Run it like an enterprise sales process, right? So figure out who your best possible investors are. One way to do this is you look at all the similar companies in your industry that are not directly competitive, figure out who invested in those companies, right? Once you've built a lead list, stack them inversely based on desirability. So, your least favorite investors that you would have on your cap table, you pitch those first. The reason you do this is because they're inevitably going to ask you questions about your business that you haven't considered at length. And so by the time you're pitching your favorite investors or most desired investors, you have meaningfully shaken off the rust in your pitch. You're going to be more dialed in. You're going to be more thoughtful around exactly what questions they're liable to ask. And you'll basically have like covered the surface area of possible questions you're going to get asked. When you keep getting asked a question repeatedly, put it in your pitch deck in the appendix so that you show that you've thought about this, and maybe you kind of foreclose on the question being asked in the first place because they'll already have an answer. But really the secret is like build a great list of target investors, try to drive enough, compress the timelines in your fundraise as much as possible so that you waste less time fundraising, right? You spend less time talking to folks and more time building the actual business. And that also happily kind of drives deal heat, which is important because, like any deal, having multiple horses in the race is substantially superior to having one or none. So like you build this list, you immediately try to get warm introductions to all these investors. If you have a pre-existing network, warm introductions come much easier. That is an advantage of multi-time founders with prior venture experience. If you have no pre-existing network, one of the ways to get warm introductions, honestly, a lot of VCs will take cold intros these days. So I think the warm introduction stuff is overrated. Personally, you should genuinely just like shoot, like take shots. But even on the warm intro side, which are better if you can get them, just like where you don't have an existing network, reach out to some of those founders of those companies that are similar to yours but further ahead than you, and talk to them. And if you're building something impressive and you are impressive and you are inevitable and you are indomitable, and you have to be those things, or you certainly have to believe those things about yourself, because you're doing hard stuff, right? You're setting off on a journey to go build something out of thin air and wring billions of dollars of value out of the mist. Like, that is like objectively difficult by definition. So you'd better believe that you have some particular quality about yourself that's going to allow you to go climb that hill, and telegraph that to the people that you talk to, and then ask them for an introduction, right? Like, tell them what you're building, help them understand why you're the right person to build it, right? And then ask for an intro. And then in terms of like how to structure your pitch itself, this is really important. The two pieces of advice I have here are: one, understand the fund economics of the investor that you're pitching. So a lot of VCs, a lot of first-time founders will pitch an angel investor who might be much more interested in like downside protection and guaranteeing a double or a triple on their money than they are about hitting multi-billion-dollar outcomes. they'll pitch in the same way that they pitch like a tier 1 VC on Sand Hill Road, who clearly only cares about, are you going to be $100 billion company, right? That is all they care about. They do not care about if you're going to like 5x their money. If they're writing you a seed check out of a $10 billion fund, it's definitionally a discovery check, so they have an option on your A or B or C, right? Or really a $10 billion fund. If they're writing you an A, it's a discovery check, right? And so understand the fund economics and what outcomes matter to them, and don't pitch the wrong investors, first of all. Like, pitch people who are appropriate for the mission that you're going on and the stage that you're building at and so forth. And people get this wrong all the time and waste time getting intros to, investors that are too early or too small or underwriting much smaller prizes, or who are too big and too ambitious and are underwriting much larger prizes. And they do this all the time. So figure out the stages. Investors will tell you what stage they invest in, and they do this by telling you the check size that they write. And that usually you can like then back into what their ownership targets are and therefore what valuations they expect and so forth. But like, get the stage right, pitch investors who are stage appropriate. And then the way that I structure the actual pitch is I think about the opportunity in terms of baskets of risk, right? Like, every business is a collection of various baskets of risk, right? You might be running at something that has like really, really significant technical risk, right? Or maybe there's limited technical risk, but really it's like distribution or go-to-market risk, right? Or maybe you're doing a hardware startup that's wildly capital intensive, in which case there's like heavy financing risk, right? But usually there's like some combination of like team, problem, hard technology that needs to be solved, hard go-to-market or growth marketing kind of exercise that needs to be proven, a series of risks. Figure out which risks are the most significant and biggest, and de-risk those first, right? But as you think through this like basket of risks model for your business or for this opportunity, you'll come up with, you'll find out quickly where you have good answers for why you are, you've de-risked it, either because you've literally de-risked it and you have proof of it, or you are like credible and plausible to de-risk it, in some way. Like, for example, when I first raised for Cabana, it's definitely a risk to wonder, can you build good technology that allows you to run a field service company better than, something that you pull off the shelf? Like, that is a product or technology risk. But it's not in any sense a hard technology risk. We're not solving some novel theorem that proving some novel theorem that has yet to be proven, without which we, cannot build a business. We're trying to like charge iPhones through the air or whatever using, induction charging. The technical risk here is more of a product and kind of execution perspective. Like, can you build great user-friendly, intuitive products that dramatically move the needle in your day-to-day operating cadence and in the experience of your technicians and your customers? And I didn't have to have done that for people to believe that I could do that, because I'd done exactly that at LawnLove, right? And so I had a great answer that de-risks that particular technical risk, right? So just think about your business through a basket of risks, come up with answers to each of the biggest ones, and the way that you tell that story, like to the degree that you tell that story well, and most importantly, are truly inevitable, and you telegraph that inevitability well, that you're going to build this thing, and you're going to do it on the back of your like raw, ingredients as a founder, and your skill and your ambition and your, psychotic work effort, that's most of it. So if you're pitching the right investors and you're pitching them in a tight cluster and you're getting intro to them well, and you're conveying your inevitability, and you've already been thoughtful around all the risks to your business, and you have good questions, like, congratulations, you are infinitely fundable. You will raise money.
Let's go from here smoothly to something which is not too often discussed, and banks being a commodity. And you've shared, you retweeted something some time ago that you had a deal going on, and you pretty much emailed to your person in the bank, and the wires were created within an hour. And you've said relationships matter in there as well. I think this is something which is not discussed very often. So what are your thoughts on this, and how have you been able to be in a position that those wires were cleared within an hour?
So this isn't great advice to your listeners because the answer is get into elite networks that have a lot of powerful people in them, highly powered people in them. So this is basically downstream of Y Combinator, which is, the premier startup accelerator, almost $1 trillion portfolio of the companies that they've founded so far. One of their, former visiting partners and kind of multi-time YC founders, a guy named Imad, who founded Mercury. And in this particular case, we're buying our first business, a company called Pool Logic, from a gentleman named Kyle, who's still works with us and is a phenomenal human. Rolling up to the closing dinner with Kyle and his wife, Abby, and we were faced with a very real prospect. Or, I wasn't quite rolling up. Like, this is in the mornings, wires hadn't closed, but was set to have dinner with them that evening. And faced with a very real prospect that these wires that we initiated first thing at like 6 a.m. were not going to clear for various arcane banky reasons. And Kyle, you know how it is. Like when you sell your company, I definitely felt this having sold a couple companies. You trust the sellers. You have to trust the sellers. You don't transact if you don't trust them. But there's some part of your brain that's not zero. That's always like, am I getting screwed? Like, is this person gonna like gotcha me? Did he just take the keys to my business and he's gonna like abscond into the night and I'm never gonna get paid? So like, it's really important to put dollars in people's bank accounts because that immediately alleviates all of that stress. And it's especially important to do that before you have a closing dinner with them. So we were looking at like going into this closing dinner and the wires were not going to hit and it was Friday. And so he was going to sit there and like churn in his own soup for like 3 days if these things didn't get cleared. And I was fortunate enough to have a connection to Imad through Y Combinator. So, texted him and he immediately like cleared these wires personally. And that's just a huge advantage, but it's not a useful thing to like say on a podcast because it's like obviously trivially true that if you're deeply well networked across a bunch of, operators in an industry, you're going to have remarkable advantages getting things done in that space. And the only way to get to that position is to just like do a bunch of cool stuff and spend a lot of time compounding in your respective industry. And then you accrue these advantages over time. And, the most express version of this is like, you can call the president and he does something cool for you, it's all titrates down to degrees of influence and advantage from there. But yeah, like being a known quantity and having done important things gets you access to communities and networks and relationships and friendships that help you unblock important hurdles at various points as an entrepreneur. That is very, that's just like obviously true.
Now you've spent a lot of time in different, as you said, communities. You're in those networks. You've bought businesses. You've sold businesses. What is the best investment advice you've received yourself? What's something that comes to your mind and maybe something you live by?
I mean, I think I'll like use this more from the Cabana lens, right? Like investing, buying companies. I'm not going to talk about like public market trading because I don't presume to speak well on that. But like I do know a lot about buying businesses, and I got some advice that I ignored in the past, and we will not ignore in the future. And it is that you should only buy businesses from people that strike you as like extremely good faith actors. You should ignore the financials. And no matter how good the P&Ls look or how good the financials of these businesses look or how good the terms are or what your price you're getting it at, if you don't really love the sellers and think that this is a great person who operates in good faith and is open-handed and clear-eyed and good of heart, you shouldn't buy that business. And the reason you shouldn't buy that business is because companies come to exhibit the traits of their founders, right? Dogs look like their owners, companies look like their founders. It's just inevitably downstream of all of your like culture is mostly just the expression of your personality and your, foibles and idiosyncratic, human bits that ultimately get filtered over time into culture. But like, if you don't think that the person is a good faith operator and you buy their business, you're probably right. You should trust your gut. And you are going to find that there are many things in these businesses that have been, hidden or corners cut or, culture cultivated in the people in these businesses that don't match your values and aren't aligned with the company that you're trying to build. So like only buy good businesses. Yes, they still have to be good. The financials have to be good. but from good people. And if you ignore the from good people advice because the good business part looks so attractive that you're like, I can't help but just buy this thing, even though I think the founder might be shady, you're going to regret that. And it's not as good a business as you think. And that is the best advice I can give people who are trying to buy companies is you got to like the people that you're partnering with. And if you don't like them fundamentally as people, there's probably something there that's, subliminal that's being communicated to you by your gut, and you should listen to it.
Okay, Jeremy, this is awesome. One more question. I know you're busy. What is the favorite book, or what was something very good you recently read?
Oh, man. I'm reading 2 books right now. One is The Inner Game of Tennis, which is actually not about tennis. It's about the mental game of high performance athletes and really high performers broadly. It's kind of an old book. It was written in the 70s. But I'm about halfway through and find it fascinating, and it's really, really great. Mostly kind of centered around how do you quiet the, type 1 or type 2 thinking that's like overanalyzing all of your performance while you're performing and get into flow state so that you can actually perform well. Really interesting book. And then the other book I actually have right here is Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche, about the Uberman and, will to power and conquering your environment and designing the optimal self. I think Nietzsche is interesting. I'm not like hugely Nietzschean as a person, but I try to read kind of broadly across philosophy. And it's hard to ignore his ideas. They've certainly become like canon in the zeitgeist over the last 60 years. So trying to be like more Nietzschean in my more Nietzsche informed, let's say, even if I'm not like, totally convinced that this is ultimately a healthy worldview.
Okay, Jeremy, this was good fun. I'm very happy we eventually got it done because we were talking about this in August. Now it's December.
Thank you.
So very happy that we and let's do it again in the future. But yeah, thanks for your time today, and talk to you soon.
Super fun, Mick. Great chatting, man. See ya.